So guys, I'm on such a high after that episode just because it was so good, so important for character development, and that is, well, because of the title, Therapy Patrol. So let's dive straight into this review of Doom Patrol Episode 7, Therapy Patrol. How's it going, Doom Patrollers? Welcome to a brand new episode, breakdown and review of Doom Patrol, Therapy Patrol, and that was such a good episode. I mean, it was funny in parts, especially towards the end, and tragic, but no, this episode was just absolutely exceptional for exploring each character even further, and just also highlighting what Mr. Nobody is kind of doing, and if they carry along the route they're going along, they're going to end up just like the original Doom Patrol that we saw back in last week's episode. So before we get into this, guys, subscribe to this channel if you enjoy these breakdowns, especially if you're going to enjoy this video. Hit a like on it. It really does help out the video, helps it grow a little bit more, and I really do appreciate that. So let's dive straight into the beginning, and that is where they were at the kind of end of the episode with that group therapy meeting. But little did we not really know that what it was about there. At the beginning, I honestly thought it was starting off to be this episode about them talking about what they're going to do about finding Chief next. And I think one of the most consistent things I say about Doom Patrol in every review is that usually each episode so far is focused on one character more than the others, but they still manage to do a lot of heavy lifting and giving a lot of development to all the other characters. And I honestly feel like this is one of the best shows I've ever watched for stuff like that. It's absolutely phenomenal for giving a lot of attention to the characters and making you feel connected to each and every character. And I know this show is about this dysfunctional family, so it's kind of like, well, Boba, what else would you expect it to be? But that doesn't mean they would have done it in a great way. I feel connected to Larry, Rita, Robot Man, Jane, other versions of Jane, even Chief, who we haven't seen much. It's just great. So, you know, with Rita, we kind of got her meeting her idol in 1930, so this was kind of exploring the childhood fascinations with her acting. You could kind of see how that actress was, it's kind of ironic. She was a little bit almost hollow or shallow herself when, you know, Rita was just looking up at her idol. So I thought that was quite a neat or poetic way of doing things. And that's where we also saw Rita struggling with her body. Now, I found this actually really powerful, like some of the lines that she actually said. For example, you know, well, first of all, we can't forget how last week she threw Rita far away. She was tearing down all those like pictures. Like her whole room was like a vain kind of shrine to herself, right? And we all know what Rita's like. But she kept saying like the person who is breathing is me, and she didn't really want to rely on Rita Farr, but she did say the person who is breathing is Rita Farr, and I think that helped out a little bit. But she doesn't want to be that person anymore. So that's when she kind of started to, you know, as we saw her say even more and like crawl throughout the manor in a blobby kind of way. She started saying, and it kind of made me feel a bit sad, like the person who deserves this is me. Now, even though we got that group therapy session courtesy of Cliff, even acting like a little bit of a douchebag, where we kind of understand what was going on with him due to Admiral Whiskers, which is, Jesus, I love the writing in the show. We still didn't find out the exact, you know, thing that Rita has done that is providing her this incredible guilt, and you know, she feels like she deserves this slime, but I freaking loved that. Next character we explored was Larry in 1935, and you know, this was exploring his childhood running around with the plane, and obviously foreshadowing he wanted to be a pilot. But a really sad thing about this, but it was a fact of the times, you know, obviously people were a lot more homophobic back then, and you know, he was showing these gay tendencies, and his parents were talking about it. They were like very ashamed of it, and they were like, our lives are going to be ruined. They were kind of embarrassed of him, and he was just standing there outside basically crying, hearing his parent. I mean, that must be horrible. And they really even explored that further with the negative energy, kind of trying to make him relive his old memories. Because I love what Larry said at the end. I feel like it kind of personifies what is going on with the first clue we got a few episodes of, torture, of what the spirit said to Chief, if you will, and how the more Larry tortures himself, he's torturing the negative energy. So really, the negative energy was just trying to kind of help him, which I found quite sweet, to be honest. But, you know, that was providing Larry a bit of frustration because the memory wasn't 100% correct. But really, this was kind of like negative therapy, which doesn't sound right, but you kind of get my drift. And the negative energy was just trying to, you know, show him or like talk through some of his stuff and admit stuff to himself. This is what I mean. So much exploration. Now with Victor's flashback, of course, we visited Detroit, but this was back in 2002 when he was a kid, and his shoulder had popped out of his socket, and it was kind of really feelsy because he was with his mum. They were talking about how they didn't want to tell dad about it, and we all know that, you know, Victor's relationship with his dad is a huge ass thing, and we got quite a big reveal at the end, or like a lot of seeds and foreshadowing into a big reveal, which I can't wait to talk about. It was just, you know, kind of sad to visit that, you know, with his mum. Just sweet memories, really. But I found it hilarious when he started getting on the dating app. But this kind of added another argument in the system with his father, Silas, because, you know, maybe he would have used it more in the years that had passed, because he'd actually been hit up a few times. So he kind of feels even more antagonized by his father, because he could have had a bit more of a social life through social media, if you will, through meeting other people. Now, maybe you could argue Silas was trying to protect him through maybe people, you know, like disregarding him, which actually happened in the episode, and I felt really sorry for him there. So this was like, this is what I mean. Doom Patrol can play with funny emotions all the time, mixed with really like sad moments all the time as well. And that is what happened throughout this episode a lot. Funny as hell moments, but then it's like, shit. I also like how they threw in there about how Cyborg didn't even realize his own catchphrase was Booyah, because the grid like said he'd said it 32 times, which is well over the threshold. But this is where Cyborg got attacked by Robot Man, and it kind of brought that whole like pathway that was leading up to that moment, because we kept having it reoccurring throughout each different person. Yeah, because he was basically having a psychotic break. But more on that in a second, because this is where it paused for a moment, because we visited Jane. Now, Jane's was just very quick like that. They're obviously reserving this storyline, because one thing I keep saying throughout these reviews is that Jane and Robot Man, I feel, even though this show does an amazing job, as I keep saying, about character development and making everyone feel almost as important as the other, Jane and Robot Man are very crucial to this season, at least. So we saw Jane in 1950, essentially Kay's father. Like, we saw her as a baby, so it really is Kay Chalice. And if you didn't know, Jane was abused as a kid. That's what we saw last week, with you know, her running away from that, like, those puzzles in the hand coming out of it. You know, we just saw that guy just creeping out on the baby. I don't really want to get into this too much. It's just so messed up. I think we're going to only explore this even more, because it's kind of being drip fed to us more and more. But, you know, this is where we had Jane kind of freaking out in between her personalities, that little montage of her looking at the clips. And she's really, really not getting over the fact that because of last week's episode where she learned from Josh, the guy who looks after the Doom Patrol there, who also is Tempest in the comics, revealed that Chief was going to take, well, she had a room there. So she also called the Doom Patrol, the original Doom Patrol, people who were abandoned by Chief, like broken toys, and she realized she was going to be one of them. So she is pretty pissed in this episode, and I do understand why, because she hasn't got the answer yet, but I'm sure we're going to have, I'm looking forward to that conversation with her and Chief where she kind of gets the context. Now, I really like how they explored Robot Man's angle, because it was quite deceptive at first, because we didn't know about freaking Admiral Whiskers at the get-go, but we did get that 1961 flashback of, you know, Cliff's father abusing his mother, and him saying, I'm going to be better, and, you know, you can kind of see how this reflected upon him and his life from the flashbacks in episode 1, where he was just drinking himself, saying, oh, I'm going to change, ringing his wife up, you know, and he even admits to himself, like that later on in the episode, I think during the group therapy, that he turned into his old man, and basically a vicious cycle. But everything from that moment onwards wasn't really real, where he saw Bump and his daughter and he was going crazy and everything like that. I think everything he was seeing was a manifestation, well, it was a manifestation of his own mind, but everything Bump was saying, he's assuming Bump would be a bad father. He's assuming that his daughter ruined his bachelor game and everything like that, when I think, in fact, we're going to find out at some point that Bump has probably really looked after his kid and they are having a good life. I think it's just everything, well, as I just said, that he must assume that it is, but he's going to learn that it's probably the opposite. But one thing that happened where all of this started to unfold into the Cyborg fight that kept getting teased throughout the episode, it made me feel really sad when he was having a psychotic break. Now, at first, as I said, we had no idea what this was to do with Admiral Whiskers. This is what I mean. You feel so sorry for these characters, but then they pop stuff like this in. It's genius writing. I love it. Anyway, I felt really bad for him, even though putting Admiral Whiskers aside, because he just said, like, his brain is screaming for a release. He wants to cry, he wants to feel stuff, but he can't. And that must be so infuriating. Imagine feeling all of that emotion and then like you can't get the release, you know, like the brain release of letting the tears out. You can only imagine what it's like to live as Cliff, but he also had a mouse chewing on his brain, I'm sure. So yeah, that was pretty sad to watch unfold, and he was twitching and stuff all the way throughout it. But this is where he suggests group therapy, and this is where things only like increase even more, you know, in terms of character development. So now addressing the group therapy with Rita, we had her exploring how Mr. Nobody wants this. You know, she likens it to that of the old Doom Patrol, like we've already discussed, and she goes on to explain how she's been dangling this deep source of shame, you know, which we still don't know about yet, but she also talks about confronting the truth, that if there is no Rita Farr, there is nothing else there. But as soon as she spoke about that, her legs changed. So I really am loving Rita's journey. I can't wait to see her discover herself even more. But one thing I also loved about this before we get into Larry is just all these characters confiding in each other anyway. They definitely need to get a little bit closer to each other, even though that probably didn't seem so apparent. It was still nice, you know, seeing them talk like this. So with Larry, you know, he says it gets lonely not being with anyone for like 60 years, and he briefly talks about John, and even though Robot Man's acting like a bit of an impatient douche at this bit, we all know why. He discusses yet again, Mr. Nobody, the theme of torturing each and every member, and him yet again, and as a result, it's hurting the spirit, as I mentioned earlier. And with Cyborg, this was a very interesting moment that brought up the bit I said earlier that I really wanted to talk about. He was talking about killing his mum, he explained the origin, and he revisits the seed that Mr. Nobody planted, which was about his memories being real or not on the night of that accident, we know, with Cyborg's origin and his mother dying. And he questions, the thing is, if it wasn't a real memory, then what could be like, if it was implanted, because they've, you know, he's explored that video footage in the grid before, what could be worse than that? That's the big reveal, I think, that is going to be really kind of jaw-dropping, maybe. But then again, he doesn't trust his father, and why is that? And that is when Crazy Jane brings down that painting that she drew. And this is what I mean, it's tying off so many things that we wanted to know about from quite a few episodes back. And that's with Cyborg holding his father, Silas, and the Doom Patrol dead around him. So it's kind of like foreshadowing that Cyborg has maybe the capacity to go completely rogue, maybe. And there's definitely something Silas knows about that. And this all feeds into the fact, or sorry, the theory of there's more to that night that Cyborg even knows about, with his mother dying, and Silas is protecting him from finding out the ultimate truth, which I can't wait to get to the bottom of this barrel. That is when, guys, Cliff starts going crazy again, starts fitting, and a freaking mouse crawls out of his mouth. What? So has that mouse been chewing on his brain? But the worrying thing is, how is the brain gonna, like, you know, like regrow itself? That's probably not gonna happen. So I'm just going to assume that it hasn't been eating the brain, but maybe just like playing with it, you know, thus causing him to like go crazy, because, you know, if it was eating on his brain, he would have a lot more problems than what he's having now. But this is where we had the very, very Doom Patrol implementation of their crazy ass writing with Admiral Whiskers and Mr. Nobody. Dude, this was just so crazy, and what I love this show for, beyond this brilliant storytelling, is that we had this flashback to 6 episodes ago. Admiral Whiskers' mum was talking about crossing the road. She crosses the road, gets absolutely crushed, and that is where we saw that horrible screech. Really, I felt really sad in this moment. You know, poor little freaking Admiral Whiskers crying out for his mum. But that's when, as I said, Mr. Nobody took advantage of this and talked the mouse into vengeance. And the subtitles were hilarious as well. You know, calling Cliff Steele the agent of death, and he's here to get his revenge on Cliff. It was just so funny. And you know, that's the explanation as to why, you know, Cliff was going crazy. And obviously, this is all a part of Mr. Nobody's plan, because the Doom Patrol, at the end of the day, are a low-key threat to him, and he's weaving the stuff throughout this to try and make them turn against each other and cause problems, drive them crazy, kind of like replicate what happened to the first people, but in a new way. Like it's this new F-up for the new Doom Patrol, if you will. And that was essentially the episode, guys. Absolutely freaking phenomenal. Loved it. You know, I don't want to say this was my favorite episode, because I feel like that every week. I'm going to have to like do a season overview or something after this ends so I can really tell you what's going on there. Next week, guys, we are getting Danny the Street. The synopsis for that episode was something like a sentient, genderqueer, teleporting street named Danny is being hunted by the Secret Bureau of Normalcy and gets help from Vic and Larry. So that's going to be a very interesting episode. But that is the review, guys. As you can probably tell, I can't stop uploading this show. So, as I said, don't forget to leave your comments down below. I do read every single one of them. Just might not be able to reply to every single one of them for obvious reasons. But thank you so much for watching. Links, as always, are in the description down below. I encourage you to join my Discord server so you can talk with me directly about Doom Patrol in the Doom Patrol section. And that is, everything. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you Doom Patrollers in the next video. Goodbye.